Welcome to Bits About Books, the home for conversations with authors of breakthrough books on sales, marketing, and business. Founders, entrepreneurs, and individual professionals, we all need to keep track of ideas that are helping create our today and tomorrow. Bits About Books will strive to find those books and speak to their authors, go behind the scenes and understand what inspired the authors to write the books that they did and how they went about doing so. Through our conversations, we hope to gain insights that will help us to get the most out of our efforts. I'm your host Shubhanjan Sarkar, founder of PitchLink, the next generation buyer-seller engagement platform where our mission is to make buying easy. Welcome to Bits About Books. Thank you for your time and for joining us in this session. I have a favor to ask. While you continue to listen to the podcast, please leave a comment or rating at iTunes or wherever else you get your podcasts from. I personally look at each comment and will give you a shout out to each of you in our following episodes. It means a lot to hear from you. Our guest today is Shantanu Kumar, and we speak with him about his new book, Starting and Scaling AI Ventures.
And once information gathering is happening, what source of information is giving how much value? So how much do you rely on, maybe if you're just writing code and you ask an expert how to go about this? Maybe you listen to them, but maybe you still do what you have to do because your losses are limited. You can still write your own code and lose nothing at the end of it. But when you're deploying this to users, and if you don't listen to somebody who's done it before, what is the delta loss that you have? So that was the second step, to just understand what piece of information at what stage of the landscape is most important to users. So, and if it's not creating enough value at that stage, can we bolster that piece of information more? Can we research more there? Can we write more there? So I think it was just mapping of that current landscape, understanding where are the information sources coming from and how important are they at each step, and where is my expertise lying to be able to fill that gap.
Shantanu Kumar is a data scientist at Snapchat on the international growth team and the author of Starting and Scaling AI Ventures. He previously worked at LinkedIn and was the head of AI products at Infido, scaling it to multi-million-dollar revenues to be one of the leading employee engagement organizations globally and a part of Y Combinator's Summer 2020 cohort. He also had a stint in Udacity's data team and is the author of LexScore, a sentiment lexicon contextualizing algorithm. As an active contributor to Stanford Scholar, Shantanu's research on fake news detection is voted highest on the platform. A global speaker and guest lecturer, Shantanu has taught at many B schools in India and spoken at various AI and entrepreneurship forums. Now, on to this futuristic discussion with Shantanu Kumar. Shantanu, welcome to Bits About Books. I'm thrilled to have you here because a lot of the books and authors I talk to, with the barring one major exception of Carl Gold, who came and spoke about churn, and he was a data scientist at Zuora. Barring him, I do not talk to many data scientists. Okay, so it is an absolute pleasure to have you here, and I am really looking forward to this chat. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Vanjan. And likewise, I think heard very, very good things about the podcast and very happy to. I think you're right. I think the data science space, I'm glad I'm the second person on this piece, but I hope I can make it worth your while as well.
Well, I'm quite certain because the book itself is, to my mind, very timely because AI is a much maligned term. People use it very loosely, simple, logic threads are presented as AI, right?
Oh yeah, but I think one of those and great point that you speak about, because I think there's with a lot of and for just like a quick anecdote and a little bit of background, I think this space. So I started learning a little more about this space when I was about 14, 15. So very early back then, it was a lot of mathematical decision making. So new terms are being thrown around back then. So I think it's just been a good 30, 40 years of evolution of this field as well. Of course, I haven't been here long enough to see all of that. But from what I saw, it used to be mathematical decision making. Then came statistics, then came data science and AI. So I think it's just like a jumbled bunch of similar words. I think the core of all of which is data. So very happy to get into that space as we talk more as well.
Wonderful. So before we get started, I know your background, and you can talk about that a bit if you want.
Yeah.
Why did you think it was necessary, or when did you think that it's necessary to write a book like this?
So I think great question. First of all, I think just a quick piece on how the idea first came about. So I think one of them was two moments, as a matter of fact, and only one of them were times where I actually had capacity in me to be able to act on that idea. So I think one of the times when I was very young, and we just saw. So I was hearing about Edward Snowden back in the day, and the NSA and everything. So I think lots of that with his book that came out, Permanent Record, as well. So I think lots of that was early inspiration for me in the fact that we have been living for a very long time, but there is we act, and our actions make other actions for us, and so on and so forth, right? So I think it's very machine like in some ways, that a lot of people would conflict, disagree, and so on, but I think there's a lot of times I feel that the decisions that you've already made feed into the decisions that you are about to make by virtue of either self-image, by virtue of the path you've already taken, and so on and so forth. So I think this was when I was a lot younger, and I read that book. I realized that there is a lot of data out there in the world that is not inside computers. So just by virtue of what a lot of people would say, understanding of self, what a lot of people would say, just wisdom, right? So I think it's a blanket term now that we use. A lot of that, if put down into digital formats, and of course there's as we've seen language grow across the previous few decades and centuries, I think language always just goes towards brevity as compared to actually using more stuff to be, because we're all about faster communication, smaller time blocks. I think as that scales, we're reducing information to as smaller chunks and pieces as we can, and your vocabulary is increasing. But that takes away from the fact that there is lesser detailed information out there about how communication is happening, how decision making is going on. It's all in the head. People sometimes need to meditate, slow down to understand what's going on. So I think lots of those things in place. This was very early on when I realized that there is data out there in the world, but there is so much that is not. And that's driving most of what we do today. So I think when you look at the larger scheme of things, we don't track what happens when we wake up in the morning and brush our teeth or have our first meal, right? Like what's going on in our head is untracked, but it is data to some degree. So I think that was one of my triggers, but that was more of an emotional trigger to just put out there in many ways that, and the book ended up taking a very different route from that. So this was when I was at Udacity as well, when I had a brief stint there in their data team. So Udacity was building large-scale solutions for education and across the globe. And this is when I thought about the fact that this is something that can help improve learner outcomes as well, how students learn in classrooms and so on. So just awareness and understanding of AI, of data, and how we can build a lot of those things into our modern day solutions will change the way we perform and we think. But so this was the first emotional trigger. Of course, back in the day, I was too young. I was also mostly caught up it was just my first role anywhere else. So most of it was just me thinking that I'm reaching far beyond what I think I know, and the idea is probably good, but maybe I'm not the right person to be able to put that out, and so on and so forth. So I think that was the first piece, and more of an emotional trigger. The second time was when I was spending time with Infido, and I just exited the company as well. So I think this was early March 2020. I just moved on to LinkedIn. So I think one of the best things that we learned there was just by virtue of the fact that we ended up going to Y Combinator. I joined them when we were at about 300,000 annual revenue. We went on to about two and a half, I think far more now. So did a lot of things that worked out, grew well, scaled well. But a lot of times from my function as well, I realized that some of the decisions we made didn't really have, and you say a lot of times, right? Like people say that this was a gut-based decision. This was, you thought about something and you did it and it worked out because you measured it. So lots of that was in place. So we didn't really know, from my standpoint, I thought that it's useful to put out how we made those decisions because it helped individuals. And for context, Infido is an employee engagement solution. We have a bot called Amber. Now, Amber speaks to employees at regular intervals to try to understand how they're feeling, whether they're happy at work, not happy, whether they're about to leave the organization. So attrition is one of the biggest problems in HR in the world, right? And regrettable attrition is one. It costs a lot of money. It costs a lot of retraining, rehiring. So we were in that space, and we realized that what we were building really helped people just open up, just talk. And we thought that maybe we're doing something right somewhere. So that was the second trigger when I moved on to LinkedIn, is when I realized that there is something that we did that worked, and we might as well just start to think about it, because a lot of times how AI and data is being used in the world today is cut and dry, out of the box solutions being put in places sometimes where they don't belong. And I feel usage of a lot of these solutions are narrow but very powerful. And in the wrong places, in the wrong ways to implement them, sometimes they can just go sideways. So I think that was the second trigger that I actually ended up acting on. So spent a lot of time at LinkedIn just putting out that book, just writing in my free time. Had the great chance to be able to bring in and speak to a lot of great people just by virtue of being at LinkedIn as well. I think LinkedIn had one of the best, and still probably does, one of the best data teams that I've ever had the chance to work with. Very diverse set of folks, and that helped a lot of the research with the book as well. So I think that's just some quick background on what made me begin. But it was the second trigger that actually made me go for it and make sure I put this out there somewhere.
Sure. That's interesting. In fact, when you talk about loss of information, right? I remember I was sitting at a presentation where a gentleman, I don't recall his name, he was actually lecturing about how the shift from the Indian original way of Shruti, which is like your remembrance of epics and written work, when it moved from Shruti to text, how we lost lot of information, because when it was recited, it came with intonations, it came with emotions, and all of those were gone, and we were reading dry text, and we lost all of that completely, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So it is sort of related to how you say that there are important parts of data. A lot of data may be useless also. I mean, it's not
Correct.
that all data is useful. So if some of it is lost, it's fine. But
Yep.
sometimes very important pieces get lost. And to your point, So I just thought I'll mention that. So when you decided, you're in LinkedIn, you decide that, okay, I'll write this book. What do you do next? How do you go about actually doing it?
So I think, and this is a great question, because this is what a lot of people would face the maximum inertia with, because you realize, I think the first bit is realizing whether your idea makes any sense. So is there value in this? Has it been written about before? Are you the right person to be able to put this out? So I think lots of those very quick questions come into play. But the first thing is just researching whether what kind of decision making currently exists in the world when you are looking to put out solutions in terms of data powered solutions, AI powered solutions. What are you really doing? Like, what are humans currently resorting to? So understanding current landscape was the most important part for me, in that even if it's been written before, if it's been written before, researched before, it's great because it's validated. This makes sense. People want to read about it. If it's not, it's a little more murky, because you're figuring out what's the audience, who's going to listen to this, who is it important for. So I think lots of those things. But the first one was just, what do people do today? Like, if I believe that this is the direction where I want the book to be, or my problem statement was, I believe people need to think a little harder from start to end when they're deploying solutions that are powered by AI. So what are people doing today? How do they make that decisions when they realize they want to put something out? Do they speak to AI experts? Do they read a book? Do they actually put this out, experiment it out? So what is the current landscape? What is the current state? Once I figure out the current state, when it comes to the book, I realized if there is a current state that exists that is very manual in nature, then it makes sense to be able to put something out there. Because if right now you're not able to get the right information sources, which would mean that the sources of information are too diverse. Like, somebody's reading from maybe research, somebody's reading from opinion, somebody's talking to a friend, somebody's just putting it out there and experimenting. Uh, to some degree, that told me the fact that there is no common source of information that will give you a solid answer to the questions that you have.
So who are this kind of people? Who are your target group?
So my target group was people. So when I was my own target group in some ways from 1 year ago. So the people who are deploying AI powered solutions, data powered solutions that are impacting human lives at the end of it.
So how will you define them? Like, I mean, are these like CEOs or are these more data people who are working with AI? Where do you slot them?
So many ways, three different kinds. I think product owners would be one. So either product managers or chief product officers or anything, any roles that require you to own a product lifecycle. That is one. Second would be CEOs 100%. Only by virtue of the fact that if you are building a business that has the rock bottom of its soul as AI or as data, you need to be aware of how it brings you money, how it brings you value, and those two things. So I think these are the two. The final piece was more along the lines of an end user. Like when you are receiving AI products at the end of it. So, for example, Facebook newsfeed, recommender engines, notifications that come to you that are hyper personalized, so to speak. So these were three large audiences that we started in the order of importance. So product owners, business owners, and then end users.
Okay. Yeah, carry on. So you basically started talking to them, figuring out where they stand and what they're reading, what is their source of information in their decision making.
Correct. Yeah, today. So I think once I mapped out that current landscape, what was important to understand when, and not to say that people are still doing it and succeeding at putting out AI solutions in the world today. So not taking away from that, it doesn't mean if there is no information that information is probably like lacking or something of that sort. Like evidence of absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So I think that is what I started off with, to just say that somewhere something is clicking for somebody. So once I mapped out that current landscape, try to understand what are the avenues where ambiguity is the highest, to say that are people talking to people that are from very different backgrounds when they are looking to deploy them to end users, or when are they talking to people? Are they talking when they're writing code? Are they talking when they're collecting data? Are they talking when they're putting it out to the public? So when is information gathering happening? At what stage of building the product? And once information gathering is happening, what source of information is giving how much value? So how much do you rely on? Maybe if you're just writing code and you ask an expert how to go about this, maybe you listen to them, but maybe you still do what you have to do because your losses are limited. You can still write your own code and lose nothing at the end of it. But when you're deploying this to users, and if you don't listen to somebody who's done it before, what is the delta loss that you have? So that was the second step, to just understand what piece of information at what stage of the landscape is most important to users. So, and if it's not being if it's not creating enough value at that stage, can we bolster that piece of information more? Can we research more there? Can we write more there? So I think it was just mapping of that current landscape, understanding where are the information sources coming from and how important are they at each step, and where is my expertise lying to be able to fill that gap. Because from start to end, I can probably write about everything, but I won't make sense everywhere. So I will probably sound a lot foolish maybe at the end versus at the start and all of that. So just making sure we strike that balance between what is my expertise versus what is the current state gap in how information is being fed. So I think these are three broad ways I started off when I thought about them. And the final piece I think was came in fact when I actually started mapping out ideas to say that how did we do it basically at. And so a lot of the book is very storytelling in that a lot of what we did at Infido comes into play, to say that this is how we did it, this is how it worked, and this could be a line of investigation that you look at as well. So when a lot of those ideas were mapped out for me, when a lot of that thinking came into play, the final piece was a quote unquote validation in many ways, in that I've done it too, but you might want to hear from experts who do it on a daily basis as well. So in that there is somebody who's doing it a lot more than me. There is somebody who's done it for a lot longer time than I have. So just bringing all of those sources of information in one place together as well, to make sure that even though I put out an opinion of my own, there are people who've done it in all walks of life across the board everywhere who continue to do it. There are some places where they might disagree with me. There are some places where they might agree with me, but all of the information at the end of it is in one place. So I don't mind contradicting myself in the latter half by virtue of anything else, but just that the reader or somebody who's actually trying to solve for this has everything in one place, regardless of how it goes for me.
So that's where I believe your experts who you brought in to write the chapters came in, and that's the role that they're potentially playing there. Just before we move on and actually talk about the book,
Yeah.
what did you find? What were companies doing with data? What were they doing when they're talking of getting AI into their system? What did you really find before you wrote the book?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I also, by virtue of what I found, divided the book into three different sets, which was before you start, once you start, and once you've gotten into the process. So I think these were three places where I felt maximum delta existed between current state and what companies were doing. I realized one of the biggest problems with stage number one, which was when you begin the process of putting out these solutions, was just that they AI was a buzzword, right? As you said, like data science, AI is being used all over the place. So a lot of people had AI solutions to problems that did not need AI solutions. So I'll give you an example as well. So I think one of them was just if I'm trying to understand whether once a user comes in to my web page and they click a button, they are more likely to make a sale based on some factors and so on and so forth. So that is an AI solution to me. But in terms of just mapping out what paths they took, where they come from, what is their likelihood to convert based on all of that. But then when a user has come, for example, already bought the product, and you're trying to send them recommendation emails and so on and so forth, a lot of this can be achieved without putting in a lot of that investment. In that these can be very quick hacking, because once somebody's made a purchase, of course, you can convert simple problems into AI problems or data science problems as well. But some problems are just right in front of you. Like you don't necessarily have to have very large, robust systems, machine learning algorithms to be able to do this for you, because this is something that you can quickly validate, learn from, and move on from without even that much investment, that much thought. And I think that's one of the biggest gaps that I felt that people are applying. I think there's one of my colleagues who I worked with at Udacity named Luis Serrano, and he used to speak about this a lot, is that you don't kill a dinosaur with a flying pan, and you don't kill a housefly with a bazooka. It's the other way around. So that's what he used to talk about. I felt that a lot of times businesses are trying to kill houseflies with bazookas. So the solution is far more power than what the problem presents itself as. So I think that was one of the biggest deltas I found when they began the process. During the process, one of the biggest things that I found was a lot of times there was very little thought on the fact that there is one way to be able to serve this to users. In that people and humans are humans at the end of it, right? So one of the examples was when we look at how the GDPR came into place, and everything that happens in the US with the their federal penitentiary and the convict ranking system, and a lot of those things that have come into place. So I think lots of those are AI solutions that exist in private. Yes, they work out well, but when you position them outside badly, they can be taken badly. So if I tell you that, Shantanu, you're going to come to a bank, and just by virtue of everything that you've done in life already, I will give you a score that says whether I can give you a loan or not. So times can change, things can change. I always believe in something that I quote from Nassim Talib as well. I think the linear is not the norm. The non-linear is the norm, because you cannot forecast into the future so far ahead to be able to actually understand from past patterns that something might happen. And of course, you could be right most times, but you have to give room for that non-linear, which I did not think companies to many degree understood, gave as well. And I think I write about this in a very little anecdote in my book as well, to just say that, and this was mathematician Michael Barry that wrote about it first, I think a couple of decades ago. And he said that, and this was a very fascinating anecdote for me when I put it out, was when you're playing pool, right? When you're playing billiards or anything, and a lot of us have done that before in the past, maybe have family, friends who do it on a daily basis. But when you play pool, when you start the game, when you take your first shot, there are maybe 10, 12 variables based on which I can tell you where the ball is going to go. how you're positioning your stake, how well versed you are with the game, whether you've had a bad day, what's the weather, what's the pattern of the billiards table like, all of that. Maybe 10, 12 variables. I can come very close to understanding where the ball is going. By the 10th shot or by the 12th shot, the number of probabilities, the number of variables required to be able to predict where your 12th shot will be are greater than the atoms in the universe. So that's the level of ambiguity we're hitting, in that nobody really knows what's going to happen. So just by virtue of selecting a very small set of data and predicting maybe 2 days, 4 days in advance can get you somewhere, but most times it can get you nowhere. Like you can be exposed to a full flow of ambiguity that has never hit you before.
Absolutely. It's time for a short break. Stay with us. After the break,
So you need to understand what kind of data is powering this decision making, right? Like for example, am I accurately able to predict based on 10 more variables that I add that if somebody's opened the door, they will enter the door. If somebody's opened the door of my house, they've rung my bell, there is intent to come in. Now I can add data points that say what car they drove in, how they're feeling right now, what is the temperature of their body. I can add 100 variables. But if they've rung my bell, there is intent to come in.
You are listening to a Business Podcast Network original. Podcasting is the fastest growing content marketing opportunity, which is untapped. We can help you craft your audio strategy and help leverage the wide reach and easy streaming capability that the smartphone penetration provides. It is easy, it is powerful and personal. Talk to us to find out how podcasting can help you build your brand and reach out to your targets like never before. Write to us at bpn@bizcast.in. That is bpn@bizcast.in. Business Podcast Network. Podcasts end to end.
welcome back. I'm Shubhanjan Sarkar, your host for Bits About Books and founder of PitchLink, the buyer-seller engagement platform. Let's dive right back into the episode where we left it. So let's get into the book. Your first chapter or first point makes it pretty clear. You need to assess whether it's really an AI problem or not, right? So how do you expect organizations to go about doing that?
I think, yeah, to begin with, I think one of the things that you start with is, as I said, are you killing a housefly with a bazooka? Is number one for me. I think if you figure out whether this problem is an AI problem, this problem requires solutioning of greater degrees, and how you understand whether this is an AI problem is just by virtue of, and I think a lot of this doesn't even require high expertise in the field. It probably just requires critical thinking. So you need to understand what kind of data is powering this decision making, right? Like for example, am I accurately able to predict based on 10 more variables that I add that if somebody's opened the door, they will enter the door. If somebody's opened the door of my house, they've rung my bell, there is intent to come in. Now I can add data points that say what car they drove in, how they're feeling right now, what is the temperature of their body. I can add 100 variables. But if they've rung my bell, there is intent to come in. So are you solving a problem that requires a great degree of expertise in a lot of those avenues? Or is the problem solvable to a greater degree, 80, 90%, just by virtue of what you already have? So I think that's where I love when organizations begin, because a lot of times we know that data scientists and so on, and just people in the space of AI are in many ways, talent is expensive, and it's getting even more expensive as we go. So which opens the door and possibility to the fact that you have to think a little more before you make those decisions. And I think that's where I love companies when they begin. The second is just, and 3 pointers on what I think that should be required. The second is just understanding how you're adding value beyond technology. In that, are you making processes faster? Are you helping human lives do better at what they do? Or are you making some sort of monetary advantage to it, and so on and so forth? So I think this is the second piece, because we've seen, and I speak about it somewhere in the middle of the book, that AI problems have this, every time you build out these data science solutions, the curve of the learning curve is very different from standard engineering solutions in many ways, because the last 1% of building the solution probably requires the 90% of effort that the kickstart, the cold start is easy. But when you get into the solution, when you're almost there, improving accuracies from 95 to 96 is the hardest, not coming from 0 to 95 or something like that. So I think that's the second one. The final one is something I believe holds most importance to me, is that what does your domain require in many ways, and how are users engaging with your domain today? So, for example, a lot of my friends are in the healthcare medical domain as doctors, nurses, and so on and so forth. And one of the things that we've seen is that patients often, and there's this whole wave about AI replacing doctors, AI replacing diagnostics, and so on and so forth, right? Is that domain, is that what's going to work well? Can you forecast a future, maybe a few years down, where patients will be okay with wrong decisions made by machines? Probably not. There's in nursing, in healthcare, there is still that very strong relevance and importance of the human to human contact, to be able to speak to the doctor, understand how it's going, to be able to associate with the nurse, what's happening and everything. So a lot of those things are still very important. How you bring in AI to your domain is crucial there, because you can go down the wave of we can do this diagnostic better than doctors, but patients and doctors will both not let your solution get adopted in that way. So either you can assist them in doing their job better, still keeping the domain more human, or you can just kickstart and be like, I'm going to replace this, I'm going to do this, and hit a wall. So I think that's the final piece.
Let's talk about two examples. One is where you see this process actually being done very well, and one possibly where it was not done very well. So actually our readers our readers and our listeners get a sense of how to look at it with some kind of a practical lens. Can you elaborate a bit?
Oh, definitely. And I love that question, because I think I also had the same trouble when I was writing this to find those examples. I think one of the easier one is to find where a solution doesn't work, right? Like, I think that's usually the easiest. Tons of domains. I want to start with education. I think one of the places where AI solutions are being used in education to some degrees are today's in day and age. We have these robot teachers who can go into classrooms. They have audio visual displays on them. They can project stuff and all of that. So these are these little robot humanoids that can be teachers. And they go to schools, they teach, because I think when you look at it unilaterally, there is a volume of quality teachers problem in the country, in India at least, and in many places across the world. So when you go about it from that lens, it seems like you want to replace teachers with like ultra advanced like machines. And when you go down that route, a lot of the teacher-pupil relationship breaks down. That is one that students aren't able to take back. You can't really talk to a robot to some degree today, right? Like, you can't have the same shared experiences, human life, that a lot of times best teachers, and everybody knows that the best teachers are probably the ones that have taught you more than just the subject that they came to teach. So a lot of times humanoid robots, and a lot of that will fail at that, not be able to bridge that gap with pupils. But more importantly, we'll have backlash from teachers' unions and a lot of that, because teachers are still, at the end of it, very, very valuable people. And my mother's been an educator for about 25 years now. So I think she believes the same things, that you can have a lot of these tools and stuff, and that could work out for you. But in many ways, sometimes it just boils down to the fact that the human connection and relationship is missing. So that's one place that it doesn't work. One place that I've seen it work to some degree, and it's still in very nascent stages, I would like to believe, is in healthcare. And a lot of things don't work in healthcare when it comes to AI, but this one I feel is getting close, when a lot of times the human eye is probably not able to detect to the same degree maybe images when you're detecting cancer, when you're detecting a lot of these diseases. So a lot of those scans, and of course I'm not a medical professional, to me it all looks like x-rays, but a lot of those scans, when you push down, machines are able to understand by very, very small nuances that this might be something that is worth a second look. And then they assist doctors to say that, maybe this is it, maybe try a couple more tests, or maybe just like figure out a little more than what you already thought, and go with that line of thinking. So that helps in many ways, because it helps doctors do their jobs better rather than taking over their jobs, because you still can't break that patient-doctor care, that entire relationship out yet. So I think lots of those, when you just supercharge with efficiency on the doctor's end, you're helping somebody who's already in their job do their job better. So I think those solutions are what work out the very best for me.
What are your thoughts? You have been in Fido, LinkedIn. Now you're at Snapchat. What are your thoughts about AI being used liberally in businesses? I mean, every new startup wants to have an AI element in their deck. They want to say that, oh, we have AI, and that sort of excites investors, looks like. So you have been sort of in that environment. What do you think businesses are doing it well? I mean, education and health are two large social problems. So I understand the impact that AI can have there. But what do you see from your point? AI actually doing in business and maybe in the tech sector where you are?
Yeah, and I think and great question. I think tech is we all talk about big tech all the time these days. So I think just to touch upon that, of course, there are some places, avenues, some topics I might not be able to touch on by virtue of my employment. But I think overarching theme is that two ways. It's and to address the first part when you mentioned a lot of people want to use AI because it sells well. I think we're getting to a place where it's getting tougher to be able to do that. But also when there are also easier out of the box solutions available more these days. So you can have a full-fledged AI powered company, but you can have no AI expertise within the company. And that's somehow scaling to a very good degree these days. Which means that the difference between research and industry is growing very large. From what I see, there are solutions like GPT-3 and DALI that have come out recently that OpenAI and Elon Musk and everybody have put through. So when you have OpenAI, when you have GPT-3, you have a set of researchers that are state of the art at what they do. And they are doing that for you, but they're making money out of it by charging you. So in many ways, I feel it works out for everybody. But remember that your business you cannot fine tune it anymore after that, right? Because you need AI expertise in-house to figure out after one point how it's going, how you're evaluating your solution. Maybe if you need to make some tweaks, customize it, so on and so forth. So you'll hit roadblocks there. But the first 10 steps, I think you'll be able to take very, very smoothly, very easily, which is now the onus is on investors and everybody else to decide whether the business only needs to go those 10 steps or needs to go beyond those 10 steps. So in that, if I'm just optimizing operational stuff, top of the line, maybe just surface level stuff, then it's okay. Like you can use AI, you can use GPT-3, you cannot have AI advantages, you cannot have AI teams inside your organization, and that works well for you. Like bare minimum understanding, that's okay. It works out if your business is in that domain. But if you want to scale beyond that, if you want to take the 11th step, that's when investors will start bringing in caution, bringing in a lot of that stuff. But usually, I think the current state that we're in, it works out well because you first take the 10 steps, you make your money out of it, then you can probably bring in AI experts. So I think that's usually working out better for the industry today. How big tech is using AI is in many ways very, very different from how startups use AI, because a lot of it is two avenues. I think one of them is growth, one of them is revenue. A lot of times when we use in the social media space or anything of that sort, like Facebook is notorious for their growth team, right? Like they will hyper personalize your notifications, your feed, your updates, your friend suggestions, everything that relates to your experience on the app is personalized to a very strong degree with Facebook. So very similarly, I think big tech, social media, we've been using it in two broad ways, either to keep you on the app, build your users a lot more, grow your user base, personalize the app so much for you that it's very tough for you to get off. That is one place. The other place big tech uses AI is revenue. So how can we make you do retentive app actions that actually bring money to us? So we can just push ads on content that are more relevant to you, which means that you're going to click on more stuff that will make us money. So I think these are two broad avenues that we've been using AI in big tech, who differs in many ways from startups, because startups will tackle very, very narrow problems when they're beginning, when they're starting out. At companies like Facebook or whatever, we're operationalizing everything from top of the line machine learning models. There is also AI for infrastructure, wherein how you're resourcing your servers and all of that is also intelligently done. And maybe at lower levels where how you are making engineering decisions, how you're deciding whether a user will come onto your app, your website, or what they will come onto. So everything top to bottom is powered by AI. And it works out very well for us because we have volumes of data that is inaccessible to startups. So I think that creates a very strong competitive advantage.
So that's another point actually. See, we use the term AI and machine learning interchangeably,
Correct. Yeah.
and that's not right. Fundamentally, AI is something different, right? It is not intelligence. Machine learning is not intelligence, right? So
Correct. Yeah.
so yeah, also sort of adding to the ambiguity in the space.
Oh, makes sense. Yeah, I think that's a very nice note that you touch upon, because I think that's something that I speak about many times. I think that's because when you say intelligence, I think intelligence is such a ambiguous term to use today. Also, because we as humans, I believe, have not been able to zero down on what intelligence means yet, right? So we believe, and this is Nick Bostrom at Oxford, at Cambridge, writes about this a lot, is that in many ways, intelligence today is believed as something that is at human level capacity, right? So we don't know anything that's more intelligent than us yet. So which means that we hold intelligence to the standards of human level intelligence. And everything that matches that is intelligence. Everything that doesn't is not intelligence. So that's one fearful way that I think that the industry might be looking at this today, in that machine learning is narrow. Machine learning solves very targeted problems, doesn't have much of a domain, can't think beyond what you've trained it to do. But this goes on to a more philosophical discussion of whether that is intelligence or whether that is not, because I have an opinion on it yet. I mean, mine is, of course, very nascently formed and moves across both ways as I still keep reading more. But from what I see, intelligence is yet to be defined, which means it could be that, and we dismiss a lot of progress in AI, and I've seen this across the board in people who write about it in the news and everything. I think Wall Street Journal is notorious for this. In that, when a machine learning algorithm is trained to a great degree, when you build out these solutions, and they beat Gary Kasparov at chess, for example, right? And they beat the world champion too many times, and this just becomes a very big thing to talk about. People say, oh, this is just a chess thing, right? Like, this is not going to scale to how Gary Kasparov makes decisions in his house and so on and so forth. So it's not human level intelligent. It is just good at chess. But if it's just good at chess, what is the problem with that, right? Like, because are you saying that it's not intelligent enough? I would argue that it is in that domain. So I think it's machine learning is not AI, because AI is thought of as intelligence in many ways that is brought about and can grow by itself. I think that's the colloquially used term for it. But also machine learning is AI. So I think that's where I'm at. It can be this and it can be that. And it's more of a philosophical discussion to be had from the looks of it than anything technical that I have expertise in either.
Right. Let's wrap up this with your experience of approaching these other experts whom you wanted to include in your book. How did you go about doing that, and what has been the result of that effort?
Yeah, and I think this was the most fulfilling part for me, to be able to put out that book, because when I got the content out, when I got the book out, I realized that across my journey, across the times that I'd spent in the industry, there are some mentors I'd had, some people I'd interacted with before. I remember my first call I made was to Dr. Shailesh Kumar, who is the chief data scientist of Reliance Jio. And I think Reliance Jio is famous in the world to be able to use very, very powerful AI systems to scale their user base to mammoth sizes that nobody has ever seen in telecom before. So I think that's Dr. Shailesh was somebody I met at a conference once. He was judging the work that I did. He gave me the prize and everything for it. So built out a very strong relationship with him. He's one of the absolute premier folks in how AI should be thought about in the world and industry, and mostly in terms of how India can be scaled out. So made the first call to him. got a podcast out, put that on a chapter, and that's where it started. So it was there, and then started reaching out to folks who I believed had a lot of moonshot experiences in domains where I felt I lacked, or domains where I felt that I could not have provided a valuable enough piece of information to my readers. So the second person I reached out to was Neerayal, and I think Neerayal is famous for putting out Hooked and Indistractable, and I think he's a very strong expert on product design and product education. And I believed I don't bring that expertise into my book because it was too technical in many ways. So brought him on. It was a lot of cold reach outs. It was a lot of convincing these great people that have done some incredible work in the industry to be able to partner with me, put this out with me, just by virtue of the fact that the ecosystem needed it, and just that their expertise can couple that with mine a lot. So a lot of cold reach outs, a lot of no's, but I think largely taught me a lot more in those 8 chapters than I actually learned by putting out my own book. So very, very thankful to be able to get those viewpoints out as well.
Bits About Books is brought to you by PitchLink, the buyer-seller engagement platform. PitchLink makes buying easy by enabling high-quality engagement between buyers and sellers through its presentation and discussion modules. Sellers create customized sales narratives using sales collaterals and personal videos, and reach out to prospects through a non-intrusive, buyer-qualified engagement. PitchLink requires no installation or download and holds the entire repository of sales collaterals and buyer-seller conversations. Talk to us to know more about how you can engage with customers without intrusion. Call us on 99021 631 32.
Great, Shantanu, thank you very much. I really enjoyed our chat, and I wish that this book is a great success. I look forward to your next one, and I hope that you'll come back and talk about that.
Definitely, I hope that works out for me too. But thank you so much, Vanjan. This was lovely to speak to you as well. I think lots of things that I learned just by virtue of the things that we spoke about. So thank you so much once again for that.
We have a fantastic lineup over the next couple of episodes with great conversations on breakthrough books. Subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you do not miss a single episode. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for being with us today on Bits About Books, where we talk to authors about breakthrough books on sales, marketing, and business. We hope this conversation helped inform and motivate as we all navigate a rapidly changing business environment. For us, these are enlightening conversations enriched with knowledge and expertise. We encourage you to go out and buy the book to learn firsthand and implement some of the great ideas we discussed today. We hope to have you with us again in the next exciting episode of Bits About Books. If you liked what you heard, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast platforms like iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcast from, and give us a rating while you are at it.
This Bizcast original podcast is produced for PitchLink, the next generation buyer-seller engagement platform, where the mission is to make buying easy. Hosted by Subhanjan Sarkar and produced by Rajiv Aditya. See you next time and have a wonderful day.